Welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Deirdre Pickerel. I'm the Dean of Student Success for Yorkville University in Toronto Film School, and on behalf of the Student Success team, I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's Ask an Expert session. As probably you all know by now, we do this every Friday at this time. We welcome an expert from our community to come in and talk to you for a few moments on a topic that we think is relevant, important to our students and the Yorkville and TFS communities, and we give you a chance to ask questions. We're here for 30 minutes, so we whip through information. We always run out of time. Where we can, we invite speakers back, but it is just the reality of trying to engage you for a quick 30 minutes on your Friday. With no further ado, I'm pleased to turn it over to Shauna Thompson, the Director of Mental Health and Wellness, who will host our session and most importantly, introduce and welcome our speaker. Shauna, over to you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. We're very happy that you're here with us today for this very significant topic, and I want to introduce our speaker. So today we have with us Dr. Finyang Erga. Dr. Erga has extensive research, training, clinical, and teaching experience in the fields of prevention and treatment of substance use disorders. Dr. Erga also specializes in the assessment and treatment of disorders that commonly co-occur with substance use disorders such as depression, anxiety, problem gambling, and problematic internet use. Dr. Erga has served as the clinical program advisor at the Foster Addiction Rehabilitation Center, also known as CRD Foster, in Montreal since 2007. As CRD Foster's clinical program advisor, Dr. Erga is responsible for the development and implementation of the center's clinical programming, clinical training and supervision, and the practicum and internship program, as well as regional and network training initiatives and partnerships. She's an experienced and enthusiastic clinician, trainer, supervisor, and workshop presenter. She is also a faculty member right here at Yorkville University in our MACP program. So please, everyone, join me in welcoming Dr. Erga.
Thank you so much, Shauna. I just have to say that the bio you have is a little bit dated in the fact that I actually left CRD Foster last November, so I am now fully in the private sector, but otherwise everything else you said is accurate. So thank you. And thank you, Dr. Pickerel and Shauna, for inviting me to present today on such an important subject and on such a poignant day. Today, of course, is September 11th, marking 19 years since 9/11. And it's hard to believe that it's been 19 years. And yet for so many of the survivors, 9/11 feels like it was yesterday because they are very much still grappling with the loss and enduring impact of the trauma, which we know is a risk factor for suicide. And so talking about suicide and suicide prevention today feels particularly salient. Let me just say before we get started that I acknowledge that I am not going to be able to do justice to covering the subject of suicide or addressing those whom it affects in only 30 minutes or so, but please know that I fully recognize and feel in on my shoulders and in my heart the full weight of its significance. Okay, so yesterday was World Suicide Prevention Day, and the purpose of Prevention Day is to raise awareness around the globe that suicide can be prevented, and also to bring awareness about mental health promotion. Connecting openly and communicating with those who have been impacted by suicide is essential in the effort towards prevention. Speaking openly about suicide in the context of care, respect, and prevention is the only way to end stigma and to enhance support. Prevention Day's theme is working together to prevent suicide. It highlights the fact that preventing suicide requires the efforts of everyone. I'd like to share, before we get into the slides of the presentation, a brief film called Step Closer. It builds on the physical metaphor that every step closer can connect someone to life.
What's in a smile? A simple smile can mean little to you or I, but to someone thinking about suicide, it can be the first step towards life. Suicidal thoughts are complex. No one knows exactly what works to stop another tragedy. Adding to the 800,000 suicides and 20 million attempted suicides a year. We do know, though, that certain actions can make a difference. And we know that if we put a wide range of these actions in place, we have a better chance of preventing suicides. Community support, isolation so often felt, responsible and sensitive media portrayals to help people see how others have managed, local education to create awareness in the community, restricting the means of suicide to stop people at critical moments. All these actions have been shown through research to work. But we can't do all this alone. We need people on the ground to help us make the first step towards those with suicidal thoughts. By stepping closer, we can be aware of those around us who need help. By stepping closer, we can encourage those with suicidal thoughts to reach out. By stepping closer, we can support those in need by sitting in their pain. Every step closer can connect someone to life and the help they want. Sometimes those steps are big. Sometimes all it takes is a smile.
Suicide can be prevented, and we all have a role to play. And by joining together, we can shift the balance and save lives. We can change the conversation from suicide to suicide prevention. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to cover a lot of information in a very short period of time. I know I'm overshooting with my objectives here, but I feel like it is so important to include resources and share services that are available to those who are thinking about suicide, to those who are supporting someone who may be thinking about suicide, and to also address a group that's often forgotten in these discussions, and those are the people who are grieving the loss of someone to suicide. So forgive me for overshooting on the objectives. I'm going to talk fast. You'll see that my slides have a lot of bullet points on them, and instead of addressing each bullet point, I'm going to do my best to let the slides speak for themselves and to limit my commentary to highlighting the key takeaways. For most slides, I've included a hyperlink that you can click on and that will take you to the source of information and provide you with a lot more detailed information. And finally, the last 10 slides of my presentation provide additional resources and links for those three target audience members that I just mentioned. Okay, so the facts and figures. Suicide is the act of intentionally causing one's own death. It occurs across all ages, incomes, ethnicities, and social factors. The World Health Organization estimates that over 800,000 people die by suicide annually. That represents one person every 40 seconds. Let that sink in for a moment. One person every 40 seconds. That's over 2,000 deaths by suicide each day around the globe. By the end of my talk, it's estimated that 45 people will have died by suicide. We need to do better, and we can do better. These are just estimates. The actual number is unknown due to underreporting and misclassification. A lot of suicides are actually misclassified as accidents. Another sobering statistic is that for every one suicide, 25 people make a suicide attempt. Those are the estimates provided by World Health. In terms of the Canadian context, the suicide rate is 11.5 per 100,000 people, and this mirrors the World Health reporting. And overall, the global trends reported by World Health are mirrored in Canada. One difference, however, is that in Canada, the suicide rate for men is estimated to be 3 times higher than that for women. So these are the facts and figures, but of course we're not talking about facts and figures. We are talking about people. We're talking about people who are close to us, our loved ones and neighbors, our colleagues and acquaintances, prominent figures in the media, and people that we're just passing casually every day as we go through our daily routines and commutes. So while it's important to share the facts and figures, I want to share this image, which is a screen grab of the Faces of Fortitude Facebook page, to really make the point that we are talking about people. So I hope that you will take a minute to connect with these faces of brave individuals who have come forward to share their stories of recovery and healing. And I also need to just thank Mary Angela, who is the person who created this Faces of Fortitude movement, which began as a series of portraits that documents the healing of those affected by suicide and provides a safe, stigma-free space, both virtually and in person, for mental health and suicide to be discussed. Mary Angela created this movement As part of their own healing following the death of their brother by suicide, and Mary Angela is also somebody who survived their own suicide attempt as a teenager. So I encourage you to take a look at that page, and thank you again, Mary Angela, for giving me permission to share that screen grab. Okay, risk factors and warning signs. While no single cause can explain or predict suicide, identifying and understanding risk and protective factors plays a critical role in prevention. By understanding risk factors and warning signs, it gives us, and protective factors, it gives us direction about what we can change or promote in individuals and in the community, and what we can target with our treatments and work with clients. It's important to note that risk factors are not the same as warning signs. They're often confused as being one and the same, but the two are actually very different. And being able to tell the difference between a risk factor and a warning sign is important. Risk factors indicate that someone may be at heightened risk at some point in time, but they tell us little or nothing about a person's immediate risk for suicide. Warning signs, on the other hand, are behavioral changes that indicate an immediate risk of suicide. So as a familiar example, let's just take a minute to look at the risk for heart disease and signs of a heart attack. Risk factors for heart disease, such as tobacco use, obesity, and high cholesterol, don't indicate that someone is having a heart attack right now. They merely indicate that someone may be at heightened risk for suffering a heart attack at some point in time. On the other hand, warning signs of a heart attack, such as chest pain, shortness of breath, and nausea, indicate that someone may be having a heart attack right now. So similarly, risk factors for suicide, such as prior attempts and mood disorders, indicate that someone may be at heightened risk for suicide at some point in time, but it's warning signs, such as threatening suicide or seeking means for suicide, that may indicate that someone may be at immediate risk. And talking about risk factors.
Dr. Urga, there are just some questions there about really, I guess, examples of some of the risks and warning signs, what to look for, and really if there's anything that, you know, could help in terms of early detection and having some unfortunate situations being avoided.
Absolutely. And so thank you for thinking ahead, whoever asked that question. The next few slides, I'm going to give some specific examples of risk factors, warning signs, and protective factors as well. So with that, let me just go ahead and advance the slide. Okay, so risk factors, like I said, talking about them and understanding them helps us understand what might need to change within an individual or in a community in order to decrease risk over time. Risk factors can be found at various levels, the individual, family, and community level. And researchers have identified dozens, if not hundreds, of risk factors. This infographic portrays or lists some of the most common major risk factors at the individual level. And I've limited the presentation to looking at the individual level just for time constraints. And at the individual level, it can be helpful to think about risk factors as fitting within three broad categories of health, history, and environment. So in terms of examples of health-related risk factors, having a mental health condition, having a serious or chronic physical condition, including pain, having a traumatic brain injury, those are some examples of some major health-related risk factors. In terms of history, some examples of risk factors include a previous suicide attempt, a family history of suicide, having experienced trauma, disaster, or violence, or loss. At the environmental level, some of the key risk factors are access to lethal means, prolonged stress, including abuse, conflict, discrimination, harassment, exposure to another person's suicide, and stressful life events like rejection, divorce, financial crisis, life transition, worsening of a medical prognosis, or public shame and humiliation. And I just want to take a minute to talk a little bit more about that and just say that those examples of acute stressful life events are often called tipping points because they are acute stressors that might create the final impetus for attempting suicide in someone who has been struggling with thoughts for a long time. When talking about risk factors, it's important to emphasize a few additional points. Not all risk factors are created equal. And what I mean by that is that some risk factors have been shown to significantly increase risk, whereas others don't have as strong or as well demonstrated relationship to risk. So what I want to highlight 4 major risk factors for everyone, because in long lists of risk factors, things can get lost, and the fact that there are some major risk factors can get masked. So 4 major risk factors I want to bring your attention to are prior suicide attempt. This is by far the strongest risk factor for suicide. Studies have shown that those who have attempted a previous attempt were at 38 times greater risk for dying by suicide than those with no prior attempt. Substance use or substance abuse. Studies have found that those who have abused alcohol were at 6 times greater risk for dying by suicide than those who had not abused alcohol. Mood disorders. It's estimated that about 60% of people who die by suicide have had a mood disorder, such as major depression, bipolar disorder, dysthymia. And it's important to note that those are often undiagnosed or go untreated. A final major risk factor that I want to highlight is access to lethal means. And when we talk about lethality, we're looking at the inherent deadliness of the means, ease of use of the means, the accessibility that the person has to the means, the ability to abort mid-attempt should somebody change their mind, and acceptability of the means to the person who's considering suicide. The significance of a particular risk factor varies among individuals and communities, and so the degree of risk conveyed by any single factor will differ among individuals. It's also really important to highlight or to emphasize that no single cause can explain or predict suicide. High risk for suicide is usually found in a combination or constellation of multiple risk factors that converge to create feelings of despair that the person experiences as intolerable, inescapable, and interminable. So in terms of what can we do, the first step is just being aware. Most people are not educated about the risk factors for suicide. And so again, while having a risk factor doesn't mean that somebody will go on to attempt to contemplate suicide, it does mean that statistically speaking, they are at elevated risk at some point. So just knowing that somebody has a risk factor, that can just sort of raise our sensitivities to look out for things like warning signs. So warning signs, again, indicate that someone may be at immediate risk for suicide. And some key warning signs may be relatively easy to pick up on, such as when someone talks about death or saying that they want to die. Other signs are harder to spot. And what we're looking for are significant changes in behavior or mood over a relatively short period of time. For example, in response to a stressful life event or so-called tipping point. Most people who attempt suicide exhibit warning signs or red flags through what they say, what they do, and how they feel. So something else that we can do is to just pay attention, be on the lookout, pay attention to what someone says. If someone talks about killing themselves or talks about feeling hopeless, having no reason to live, talking about being a burden, feeling trapped in unbearable pain, those are warning signs that would prompt us to ask what's going on and ask, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but ask if they are thinking about suicide. Other behavioral warning signs to look for are things like increased use of alcohol or drugs, looking for a way to end their lives, such as looking online for possible methods or means. Other behavioral warning signs are withdrawing from family and friends, withdrawing from activities, visiting or calling people to say goodbye, giving away prized possessions, increased impulsivity. Some things to look out for in terms of someone's mood are things like severe depression, anxiety, loss of interest, sense of humiliation or shame, agitation and anger, and in some cases, a sudden sense of relief or improvement that is kind of unexplainable and unexpected. It's also important that we talk about protective factors. And these are characteristics that make it less likely that an individual will consider, attempt, or die by suicide. And when we think about protective factors, we can think about them as internal resources that somebody has, such as the ability to cope with stress, high frustration tolerance, a strong spiritual or religious beliefs. And we can also think about factors external to the person, such as responsibility to children or pets, having a positive therapeutic relationship, and having accessible and effective social supports. Some major protective factors that I'd like to highlight are access to effective mental health care, connectedness to individuals, family, community, and social institutions, a range of problem-solving skills. And like I said before, protective factors give us targets for interventions at the community and at the individual level. So then if you were to work with a mental health professional, in addition to working to help reduce your individual and modifiable risk factors, would also be working really hard with you to help draw upon and strengthen your protective factors and to build your resilience over time. Okay, in terms of support and resources. And Shauna, I'll just ask you to give me some cues in terms of my timing, or how much time I have left. Okay, so if you're thinking about suicide, you're not alone. As the data I shared shows, many people have thoughts about suicide for a number of reasons. And these thoughts can be very scary and are often accompanied by other feelings such as confusion, hurt, sadness, anger, shame, and ambivalence. Most people who think about suicide don't necessarily want to die. They are suffering intensely and are looking for a way to reduce or escape the pain that they're feeling. It's important to know that thinking about suicide doesn't mean that you will lose control or that you will act on these thoughts, nor does it mean that you're weak or crazy. Your feelings of pain are very real. However, there is hope and there is always another way forward, and you don't have to act on your thoughts. And you don't need to do this alone. If you're suffering and thinking about suicide, you are deserving of help. Help is available. So my message to you is to please reach out and tell someone. Connecting with others can keep you alive. That said, I know that reaching out and asking for help can be really hard. What if I'm not taken seriously? What if they think badly of me? I feel so awkward talking about this. What if I make them feel uncomfortable? These types of worries can make it really difficult to reach out, especially to a family member or friend. Ideally, you can share your struggles with a family member or friend so that you can build a sustainable network of support. However, if you can't reach out to a family member or friend for whatever reason, help is also available 24/7 through help and crisis lines. These lines offer a safe, confidential place to talk in your own way and with a trained responder who will listen to you to understand your thoughts and feelings. They'll provide you with support to keep you safe in the immediate term, and they'll connect you with local support services in your community to help keep you safe in the longer term. There are so many helplines that are available, which is amazing, but I know that it can also be overwhelming to know where to start to look. So what I've shared here is a link to Crisis Services Canada. They are just one of many helplines that are available. Something else I'd like to highlight about these helplines is that you don't have to be in a crisis to call. You don't have to wait till it's that bad to call. Most people who call helplines are not actively suicidal when they call. And that's actually the best case scenario, is that you're able to reach out for help before the thoughts and feelings become too intense. And therefore you can talk with someone who can guide you through a process to keep you safe in the immediate term. Another point I'd like to highlight about helplines is that while helplines and 911 can provide immediate support during a crisis, this is not the same as the ongoing support and work that you could achieve by connecting with a mental health professional, such as a psychotherapist, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist. Mental health professionals can help you understand what's causing your suffering and how you can manage it in the long term. So those are the two primary messages I have for you if you're thinking about suicide: is please reach out and tell someone. You don't have to be alone. Connect with ongoing support.
Dr. Urga, if someone is calling one of the helplines, whether they're calling on their own behalf or on behalf of someone else that they're trying to support, can you tell us a little bit about what to expect if they call one of those lines?
Yeah, that's a great question. So each helpline is different, but they generally operate in similar ways. So typically what will happen is that you'll call and you'll get an automated message, but don't hang up. The automated message is just to let you know that your call is being routed, has been received, and it's likely being routed to the closest crisis center available to you. And the reason why they route calls to the center that's closest to you is so that the responders are more knowledgeable about what supports might be available in your community, so that they can help connect you with those supports. During time, you can wait 30 seconds, you could wait 2 minutes. There are times when they're busier, and so the message is to hold on and wait. Don't hang up. Your call will be answered. But if you find that it is taking too long and you are in immediate danger and in immediate need of help, you can always call 911. Another question that people often ask about helplines, and it's something that could get in the way of them reaching out to a helpline, is, are they going to call the police on me? Nobody wants their autonomy being encroached upon. And so my message there is that most helplines, I think all helplines, have a value of trying to provide supportive services in the least intrusive way possible. And so while it is possible that your responder will need to call emergency services or send emergency services, so for example, if you have immediate access to lethal means, if you are intent upon acting on that plan and you are assessed to be in immediate danger, then they will contact emergency services and try to send them your way. But that really is a last resort after an extensive dialogue and trying to work with you to create a collaborative plan to keep you safe in the immediate term. And I'll also say that in one of my many resources added at the end, there is a link to what happens if I call a crisis line. So you can click that hyperlink in one of the last slides and it will take you there. That will address a lot more questions. Is that okay, Shauna?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So, okay, I'm going to speed things up a little bit because I'm noticing the time. There are so many resources that are available. I've just connected you guys with a few resources here. One is put out by the Mental Health Foundation of New Zealand. It was put together with the contributions of people who have lived experience and share the strategies that have resonated with them, that have been helpful for them in terms of finding a way back and recovering fully. But it's just one of many resources. In terms of coping with suicidal thoughts and what you can do in the immediate term, again, tell someone. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. It's the bravest thing that you can do. Try to remember that thoughts are not actions. You can put distance between your thoughts and your actions. And again, reaching out for support, whether it be a family member, or a friend, or a mental health professional, or a helpline, that they can help you. We can help you put some space between your thoughts and your actions. Try to be compassionate with yourself. It's one foot in front of the other. You need to get through the next 5 minutes, the next hour, so that you can make it through the next day. Keep safe. Get rid of anything that you think you might use to hurt yourself or kill yourself, or put it someplace where you don't have access to it. Make a safety plan. In a couple of slides, I'll share some resources with you that will give you more detailed information around safety planning. Avoid alcohol and non-prescription medication or drugs. They can change the way you think and feel in mostly unhelpful ways, and they can really exacerbate difficult feelings in the immediate term as well as the long term. They also tend to lower inhibitions and so may increase your impulsivity and therefore your risk in the immediate term. Distract yourself. Take a break from whatever you're feeling. And again, this is where accessing and calling on support from family members and friends can be really helpful. Surround yourself with safe people and safe places. Practice self-care. Taking care of yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally is so important. And as mundane as it sounds, establish a routine. Establish a routine so that you get regular amounts of good sleep, rest, exercise, and mostly healthy meals. It's okay to cheat every now and then. And one final point that I'll stress on this slide is that it's okay to take time off of work and school if you need to, and your doctor can help arrange this for you. A point that I think I have belabored, but it's so important to keep stressing, is connect with others. Connecting with people can help you stay alive. Connecting with people can help distract you from the immediate pain, and again, create that distance between thoughts and feelings and actions. Let other people know how they can help you. People want to help and they don't always know how, and so let them know how they're able to help you. So on this slide, I've just provided some links to safety planning that you may find helpful. There's a link to a paper and pencil version of a safety plan. There's a link to a detailed description of how to develop a safety plan, which is best done in collaboration with a mental health professional. And then there's also a link to one app that's available. There are many, but one app that's available where you can create a digital safety plan on your phone or mobile device. In terms of some final resources I'd like to share with you if you're thinking about suicide, are shared stories of hope and recovery and inspiration. I've already talked about Faces of Fortitude. There's also the National Suicide Prevention Lifelines webpage where people who have lived experience with suicide share in written or video form their stories. And then here's another link to a brief video, a 9-minute video from Kevin Hines, who miraculously in 2000 survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And he now spends his life traveling the world and sharing his story of recovery, hope, and advocacy. So I encourage you guys to take a look at those links. Okay. So what if someone you know is thinking about suicide? It's really scary when a friend or loved one is thinking about suicide, and it can be really intimidating to know how to identify a crisis and how to respond. People are often reluctant to intervene for many reasons, including a fear of not knowing what to say. What's key here is to express empathy, compassion, respect, genuine concern, and a desire to help and to listen. Another factor that prevents people from intervening is the myth that by talking about it, we will exacerbate the problem. And let me be very clear on this. There is no evidence to support that myth. On the contrary, in the context of care, respect, and prevention, talking openly and responsibly about suicide lets people know that they don't have to be alone, that there are people who want to listen and who want to help. And most people are relieved to finally be able to talk honestly about their feelings, and this alone can reduce the risk of an attempt. Here again, I've shared the link to Crisis Services Canada because I want to impress upon you that you don't have to be in a crisis yourself to get help from these helplines. The responders are trained to provide support, and they can help support you when you're thinking about how you can support someone that you're concerned about. They can help you make a plan to ensure the individual safety, and they can connect you to additional resources. As a mental health professional, when we're working with clients with suicide, we consult with each other all the time. So there's no reason why you can't consult for services and support as well. Shauna, how am I doing? I know we're past time.
Yes, we're very close.
Can I have a couple more minutes?
Yes, if you can especially provide resources, because
Yes.
that is what a lot of questions coming in are asking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you guys for bearing with me. Okay, so I'm going to be super speedy now. Hashtag Be the One To is a campaign to spread the word about actions we can take to prevent suicide. By empowering individuals with the tools to respond in a crisis, we can demonstrate that suicide is not inevitable, and we can build a stronger mental health net for everyone. So I'm not going to be able to go through the 5 steps with you now, but I provided the hyperlink, which will give you a detailed information about the 5 steps you can take. But those steps are very quickly asking. Just asking in a direct, non-biased, non-judgmental way, are you thinking about suicide? Can open up the dialogue for someone to share their experience. The flip side of asking is listening. So when you ask, be prepared to really listen and take the person's responses seriously. Second step is to be there, and that can be in person or through phone, chat, video conferencing. And this helps connect to someone, which we know is a protective factor against suicide. Keeping them safe. In order to keep someone safe, we need to ask if they have a plan. And on this slide are some difficult questions, but important questions to help determine if somebody has a plan. And we need to ask these questions in order to keep someone safe. And again, this is where crisis lines or helplines can be really helpful in helping you determine what's the next step. If you're not sure what the next step is for someone that you're concerned about, consult a mental health professional or a helpline. We want to connect people to resources. Again, that connection can save a life. And so connecting with people you love, but also connecting with people who are trained to know how to respond and to know the available resources is essential. And the final step is to follow up. So after your initial contact with someone who's at risk, don't forget about them. Reach out, call them, see how they're doing. It's a good opportunity to follow up on things that you may have committed to. And it's a way to show them that you are still connected and that you do care and that they are not alone. Okay, this is a brief 5-minute video that talks a bit more about the 5 steps. I encourage you guys to take a look. As you're supporting someone who is struggling, it's also important to take care of yourself. So these are some resources to some tips. I don't have a lot of time to go into this, but if you've lost someone to suicide, you are deserving of help as well. And so please reach out to somebody. Again, you don't have to be in crisis. You don't have to be at that point where things are intolerable. Grieving the loss of someone from suicide is a very unique experience, and everyone goes through it in their own way. There is no right way to grieve. I've shared just some of many resources that are available that you can access and download. And the thing that I want to stress about these toolkits is that while they are shared suggestions from people with lived experience, they are in no way an exhaustive list. And there's no right way to grieve or to cope. And so if you're consulting these resources and you don't find suggestions or strategies that resonate with you, reach out. Again, a helpline or a mental health professional can help you understand your unique grieving process and help you develop your own unique strategies for moving forward. I'm going to skip through this, my apologies, but these are just some, again, common reactions to grief. Some distilled points in terms of how you can cope with your grief now and then continue to heal and recover in the long term. A lot of these suggestions are very similar to the suggestions we've shared regarding, or for those who may be struggling with thoughts of suicide or those who may be supporting someone with suicidal thoughts. November 21st is Survivor Day this year, and so I'd like you to just be aware that there is this link. Every year a documentary is produced. This year's documentary is Pathways to Healing, Hope After Suicidal Loss, or Hope After Suicide Loss. But if you follow this link, you can find the videos or the documentaries from previous years as well. Okay, before I get to resources, if you guys indulge me one more minute, I just blew through way too much information. And again, I apologize because I know that it doesn't do it justice and it doesn't answer all of your questions. If I were to distill down all of those slides and all of those messages into one takeaway slide, this would be it. And I've borrowed some themes and images from public campaigns to create this takeaway slide. You are not alone. If you are thinking about suicide, if you are supporting someone who is struggling with suicide, if you've lost someone to suicide, you are not alone. Suicide is not a dirty word. You can talk about it. You need to talk about it. We want to hear your voice. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Having a conversation can save lives. Take a minute to check in with your friends and family members, see what's going on with them. Take a minute to inquire what might be going on with them, what they might be feeling if you've noticed a change. Taking that minute and having that conversation can save a life. It can connect someone to life. Suicide is preventable, and we all have a role to play in it. You can be the one to save a life by asking, by being there, by helping to keep someone safe, by connecting someone to resources, and by staying connected with them. You can be the one to save a life. And all of this matters because you matter. Your story matters. Your suffering matters. Your story is not over. That's my key takeaway slide for everybody. In terms of resources, I'm not going to be able to go through them all, but there are 10 slides of resources. I've organized it such that there are resources. Again, this is not in any way an exhaustive list, but there are resources for connecting with help, whether that be helplines and crisis lines. These are some links in terms of how you can connect with a mental health professional. These are some resources that are geared towards people who may be struggling with suicidal thoughts and address questions and topics that, again, feel taboo to talk about, but shouldn't be taboo to talk about. So what do I need to know if I'm having suicidal thoughts? What do I do after an attempt? How do I take care of myself after an attempt? What to expect when you call a crisis line? How do you talk to someone? How do you share your story safely and effectively if that's a part of your healing process? Resources for those who are supporting someone who's struggling with suicide. And resources for you if you have lost someone to suicide. So toolkits, helplines. And that's it. I'll go back to. So Shauna, I'm so sorry. I know I have no time left.
Thank you so much, Dr. Urga. As you mentioned, it was a lot of information. It was also a lot of very helpful information. So we did have a number of questions, but at the same time, a lot of the information was really geared towards answering all of those questions. So we understand that the information was presented quickly, the resources were presented quickly, but as a reminder, this recording will be available on YouTube. Also, we can send out the list of resources, or I'll see if we can have it posted. Either way, that will be accessible to everyone so that they're able to go through and see whichever resources may be most helpful to them based on the list that Dr. Urga has just shared. And also in the chat, of course, as I'm sure everybody knows, or we hope you know, we do have counselors here for Yorkville University and Toronto Film School students. So I've posted the links in the chat so that you're able to go to those links to book an appointment to speak with a counselor one-on-one. And also, if you have any general questions related to mental health and wellness, you can also send an email that I've added in the chat as well to wellness@yorkvilleu.ca, and that's including if you have any questions related to today's presentation. So we are over time, but I do want to thank everyone very much for participating. Thank you so much, Dr. Urga, for your wonderful and very informative presentation, as I mentioned, on this very significant issue. And really, we do need to have more conversations about suicide, because it's not a dirty word. It's something that we should be open with, because the reality is that this is a concern for a lot of people. So once again, thank you everyone, and please join us next week as we do continue to have our sessions every week at the same time. And we're happy that you were able to be with us today, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. Take care.